If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and another tutorial. Today I'm happy to sew along with you the Pawling Handbag by Hils Handmade. This is such an amazing pattern and it is so hard to believe that this has come from a new designer. Thank you so much, Hillary, for allowing me to make this tutorial. First, let me give you a tour of this bag. As you can see, she's not a huge bag, but she's a fierce bag. She is amazing. What I love about it is the use of the accent fabric to almost create, I don't know, it almost looks like it's piping, but it's not. It just draws the eye. It is amazing. And it has these two colored connectors. It has a flap closure, which is magnetic flap, kind of comes off like this, and it opens up big and wide. I did do a zipper pocket on one side and I left off the optional slip pocket as it was just too small for what I would be using it for, so I just opted to leave that off, but there's instructions in the pattern to how to make that as it is an optional feature of the bag. It has a crossbody strap. It has small side pockets here that can hold your keys or your lip glosses or any small items that you don't want to go digging in your purse for. It wasn't a super hard sew. It is an amazing scrap buster. All of these vinyls, which are from Galaxy Customs, were in my scrap bin and I was able to use them all up in making this bag. Even the lining fabric was in my scrap bin. So this is an amazing scrap buster that does not look like it would be a scrap buster. Materials I use in this bag, again, this rose gold gator croc is from Galaxy Customs, part of the Wild Things metallics collection. This rose gold vinyl was also from Galaxy Customs. All of my hardware except for the zipper is from Emmaline bags. My zipper, I'm not sure where it was from. My friend Sonia gave it to me, so I don't know where she bought it from. She gave it to me for my birthday and it was the perfect zipper to complement this, and you will see that as we go through the video. Interfacing in this bag, in the pattern it says you can use your chosen interfacing. I use Pretty in Pink Sew Foam from Galaxy Customs. I am a foam girl, but I won't lie, the foam does get a little bit thick around here. As I use a sew-in foam, I trimmed up the foam the best I could from the seams, but of course when it's a sew-in foam you can only go so far, and of course it's a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, so there's not that much room to trim it out of the seam allowances. So my machine, I'm on an industrial, can handle that perfectly. Just know the sensitivities of your machine, whether you use foam or not. There is no interfacing in the side panels. It's just in the main front and back and the bottom panels. In the pattern, she says to choose your interfacing of choice. So if you are worried about those thicknesses, definitely use some Decavol Light instead of the foam, or even EB Fuse Heavy, which is an equivalent to a Decavol Light, which I get from Emmaline bags. It's actually what I prefer over Decavol Light, to be honest, because it's woven, and this one, because it is such a tiny bag turning through a small area, I would be scared that the Decavol Light may pull away from the fabric if not fused properly, but EB Fuse Heavy definitely wouldn't. It is just an amazing product. Decavol Light is great too, don't get me wrong. I do have a piece of Decavol Heavy in the bottom for my base stabilizer. All of my cotton pieces I have interfaced with EB Fuse. Actually, this one, the pattern, she says, it's best to do with a waterproof canvas. I did not do this one in waterproof canvas. I used a cotton lining, but I used EB Fuse Medium from Emmaline bags, and that almost gives your cotton almost like a canvas feel or canvas thickness, and it worked really well for me. Again, you can use a medium woven interfacing, that is fine. But yeah, EB Fuse Medium is similar to Pellon 809, but it's woven. I love all of the EB Fuse products, as you can tell. Anyway, so that's what I interfaced all my cotton pieces with, was the EB Fuse Medium. What else? I did do some edge painting using the Giardini Edgepaint. The only thing I did different in this was the connectors. So she shows you 2 ways of doing the connectors in the pattern. So there is the non-raw edge kind, where you fold in the sides and everything so you don't have a raw edge. Or the raw edge kind, which is what I prefer because I love using the Giardini Edgepaint. I just find it gives it a little extra something to the bag. If you are doing the raw edge version and you're only doing a single layer of vinyl, make sure you do put Decavol onto the back of them, as she says in the pattern. In this tutorial, I do them the way I like to do my connectors, where I do 2 layers of vinyl, keeping in mind that, again, the sensitivities of your machine. I'm on an industrial, so it's no problem. I think my Juki 2010Q would be okay with it too. You just really got to know your machine. So I didn't put EB Fuse or Decavol Lite in my connectors because I did do 2 layers of vinyl. I do show you how I do this in this tutorial, keeping in mind that is different. If you aren't going to do the 2 layers like me, do make sure you interface these pieces, especially here, because you do not want the vinyl to tear or what have you, being a single layer. I do also find when you use Giardini Edgepaint, it helps strengthen the edges of the vinyl as well, so that's an added bonus. So I believe besides that, the only other thing I did differently was, and I did it pretty much the same, just slightly different, was I did add a decorative overlay to my zipper pocket, because I do that in all of my bags. It's what my clients my linings are almost always all the same in my bags, because that's what my clients who I sell these bags to expect from my bags. So what else? Yeah, it was great. I do use both of my machines in this. I use my flatbed 1541, which helps show how to make the bag on a flatbed, of course. And then I finished the bag on my cylinder arm, which shows how you can finish the bag using, of course, a cylinder arm and a free arm if you have it. So we do adventure into both of my machines in this video. There is a cutting video that has released already for this one as well. If you haven't checked it out, you may want to watch that before we go ahead and sew this up. I will have that link down below in the description and also tagged in the cards at the end of this video. Anyways, thank you again, Hillary, for allowing me to make this pattern or on this tutorial. And how about we get to making this bag? So you're going to need some rivets, some number 5 zipper tape, 4 rectangular rings, 2 D-rings, a magnetic snap, a zipper pull, 2 swivel clasps, and I'm going to use 6 strap ends. I only show 4 here, a slider, 4 purse feet, and your nameplate. All right, so you're going to need Decavol Heavy foam, your 2 exterior main pieces. Now I'm doing my straps double-sided, so these are my crossbody strap pieces. This is my base exterior and lining. My side 2 lining side pieces, my zipper pocket lining pieces. This was for my slip pocket, but I opted not to do the slip pocket. My 2 side accent exterior pieces, my bottom accent pieces, my 2 side pocket lining pieces, pocket lining, side pocket, slip pocket linings, as well as my 2 exterior side pocket pieces. My lining tops, now I did change those ones to rose gold later on. My main lining pieces. Now this is my connectors, what I said I was doing a double-sided, so I cut a scrap big enough to fit all 4 of my connectors on it. My handle pieces, my flap pieces, exterior and lining. And I also did double-sided for my other connectors as well. My 2 crossbody connector pieces, my 2 top side lining pieces. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and do my double-sided straps. If you need a class for that, it's down below in the description. Okay, so now I'm just showing you how I like to do my strap or my connectors. Again, keep in mind that this will add thickness. So I have cut out 4 of each kind of the connectors for this. I'm putting some double-sided tape onto the wrong sides, and then I'm going to put these wrong sides together with my large rectangular scrap piece of vinyl just like so. Now this is just strengthening those connectors. I'm not using any kind of Decova Lite or anything as a stabilizer here. I'm using the vinyl as the stabilizer. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stitch around all of these with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Do the same with my other connectors, which I have done here. And now I'm going to use my connectors as my guide to cut all of these out. This gives us a nice and even edge and a nice thick edge for when you go to edge paint these if you're deciding to do that. This is another reason why I like to do a double thickness of vinyl for these, is it's great for edge painting and it also makes your connector nice and strong. So go ahead and cut all of those out. I'm going to be using 3 base coat, 1 color, and 1 protecting gloss for my edge painting. I do have a class for that down in the description. Okay, I put my Decova Heavy outside of my seam allowances on my base exterior piece, and I'm measuring in 1.5 inches up and 1.5 inches in from each of the 4 corners for my purse feet placement. Purse feet are completely optional. I love putting purse feet in my bags. I think it just adds a little extra bling to the bag. So go ahead and install your purse feet as per your manufacturer's instructions. I do have a class for that down in the description if you need it. Now I like to put a little bit of duct tape or Gorilla Tape over top of my prongs just to secure it even further. Okay, so I'm taking my 2 exterior main pieces, my front and back, and finding my top and bottom centers. I like to use little snips within the seam allowances just because they don't wash away that way. My exterior bottom pieces, I'm also marking my top and bottom centers. I'm going to take these 2, put them right size together. They should match up perfectly, matching up those centers. And so across here with a 1/4 inch seam allowance for both the exterior or the back and the front pieces. Once we have that seam sewn, I'm going to press that bottom accent so the seam is pointing towards the bottom, and I'm going to top stitch through the bottom accent with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance to hold that seam in place. That's done, we're going to go ahead and take our front and back main and our bottom piece, and we are going to back them with foam or whatever your chosen interfacing is. Right, so that's them backed with foam. Now we're going to work on our strap or our connector piece placement. So what I've done is I've actually cut into my pattern piece that line at the top of the connector, and I'm just going to put that against my main pieces, draw a line, and then that is going to give me perfect placement for these bottom connector pieces. So I'm going to use a little bit of double-sided tape outside of the seam allowances, and I'm going to use this to help hold this in place, lining that top part with that line that I just drew on both sides. And we are going to go ahead and we're going to stitch around this with 1/8 of an inch away from that original stitching. If you didn't have stitching here, definitely just go ahead and attach this with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I didn't want to go over top of my stitching from when I made my connectors because it's sometimes really hard to follow that same line of stitching, but this way it's giving us a really nice and decorative double stitch line. So go ahead and do that with all 4 of these bottom connectors on the front and the back main pieces. We're going to do those top connectors. You can see my stitching looks great. So what we're going to do is take our top connectors, again, put a little bit of double-sided tape on the bottom, take your rectangular ring, and you're going to fold the top edge of this wrong sides together. You'll be able to see in the back, the edges should just match almost within 1/8 of an inch of the sides and the bottom of this. Go ahead, do that with all 4. Making sure they're all approximately the right size. And we're going to use a double-sided tape again to hold this in place so it stays where we need it to stay while we are stitching this in place. So again, these should place about 1/8 of an inch away from the bottom edges. Kind of use your eye and figure out what you want to do. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and sew these in place all the way around within 1/8 of an inch of that edge there. Now I am turning into my changing into my left zipper foot here. This is going to help me get really nice and close to that hardware, which we do need. So I'm going to start underneath the hardware. You can see how my zipper foot goes nice and close to that hardware. I'm going to start my stitching. And when we come to that first pivot point with your needle down, I'm going to use a piece of scrap vinyl, put under my walking foot and over top of my hardware to protect my vinyl and my hardware from being scraped up from my walking foot. And then I'm going to continue all the way around. You will do this with all 4 connectors. Now that that's all done, I went ahead and I put rivets backed with some Decaville heavy scraps and my nameplate backed with some duct tape in place. And now we're going to add our bottom onto these. So we want to find our long side centers of our bottom main piece, if you haven't already, as well as the centers of the short sides. The center of the short sides is for later when we go to put these sides on. It'll just help us get it nice and centered. I'm going to put this right sides together with one of our main panels. Clip it in place. And then we're going to sew across here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. At this point, I'm changing back into my standard foot. I love changing my feet out. It does make your job so much easier if you have the right foot on. Okay, so go ahead and sew that on with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. This is a handy trick that this pattern has taught me, and it's great for taking the bulk out of these bottom seams. So along that seam we just sewn, we're going to measure in a 1/2 inch, and we are just going to cut not quite to the stitching on both the base side and the main panel side. And that little area that we have snipped, we're just going to open that seam out. So just like so, and it is going to reduce a lot of the bulk in this area. So we're going to take this to the machine and we are going to baste just these little areas open with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Once that's done, the rest of the seam, we are going to push the seam towards the bottom and top stitch that seam in place through the bottom panel with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Process with the opposite side, and this is what that looks like, making sure that seam is open on the edges but going towards the bottom panel. You can go ahead and set this aside for now. Okay, so now we're going to work on our crossbody connectors. So you can use double-sided tape here if you like, or you can use clips, whatever your machine prefers. I have a center line drawn down the center of my connector pieces. I'm bringing my long sides in, and I'm going to top stitch those folded edges with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that that's done, I'm going to use, I have already put on a little bit of double-sided tape on the wrong short end so I can bring these together like so. So it holds it in place for when we attach this to the side panels. Okay, so I've got my exterior side panels here. On my connectors, I'm measuring up a 1/2 inch because we want to have a little bit of hangover, and we're lining that up nice and centered with that line along that edge along our exterior side pieces like so, and we're going to go ahead and baste that in place for both. Once that is done, we're going to take our lining pieces, put them right sides together with our exteriors, clip the top in place, and then we're going to just stitch the very top with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for both. That is done. On these corners here, we want to just kind of snip into those corners without cutting our threads. This is just going to help us get a nice sharp corner. And on our corners here, kind of cut them at an angle, turn this right side out and poke out all of those points and curves. You want to make sure this is really good because it is what gives the bag its unique shape. So use a little pokey tool to get that done. And then we're going to go and we're going to top stitch it with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance as well as a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So I have 2 top stitches and I basted around as well as I went and put on some rivets. So now our pocket side pieces, you're going to take the line or the side top pieces here and put them right sides together with the lining pieces, sew across there, and then we're going to open it up with our seam pointing down towards the bottom lining piece and top stitch through the lining piece for both of these. Next, we're going to take these and we are going to put them, our exterior pieces, on top of that lining piece. Both of these are right side up. Clip them in place, and then we are going to baste these together. So we have created those little slip pockets on the sides of our bags doing this. Okay, now we need to add our side accent pieces. So on our side accent pieces, you want to find your top and bottom centers. Now this is a little bit of a harder part just because we're working with such a narrow band here, but it's okay. So match up that center line. You are going to notice that these are going to be longer than our side panel. That is okay. We're going to trim that up. We're going to bring it up and around the corners, right sides together. Now in this corner, I'm just on that little accent piece going to put some very small 1/8 of an inch snips just to help it around that curve, spread that fabric out. Use lots and lots of clips so this stays in place. Again, these are right sides together. Readjust if you need to. You want to make sure you don't have any puckers if possible. And you will see it is quite a bit longer. That is okay. Do the same with the other side with some small snips around the curve and spread that fabric around that curve all the way to the top. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and you can trim off the excess of those accent pieces off the top. Then we're going to sew around here with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance for both. Okay, so now that that's done, we're going to take the unsewn side of these sides and we want to be attaching that side to our main bag. So from the top of our main panels, we're going to make marks with a disappearing pen or chalk 3/8 of an inch down from the top. And that is where we are going to line up the top of our side panel. So we're going to start with the middle of our side panels, have it right sides together with our bottom piece here. Match up your center marks. Bring up the top of the side panel, line it up with that 3/8 of an inch line that we just drew, and go ahead and clip this in place down both sides. Again, matching up on the opposite side of that 3/8 and evenly distributing that fabric all the way around. If you have a hard time getting around that curve, it's on this accent piece once again that you would be putting in those little 1/8 of an inch small snips to help spread that fabric nice and flat. So what it is we're going from a straight piece, trying to make it curvy, and those snips definitely help make it into a curvy piece to help get around those corners. Again, use lots of clips here. Again, this is the part I found the toughest in the whole bag. We are working with a very, very small area here, as we're going to go ahead and sew around there with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Again, use your stiletto if you need to help hold that in place, as you see I am doing here, and just take it nice and slow, reaching into the bag if you can, which you can see I'm doing here with my left hand to make sure there are no puckers, and just go from clip to make sure everything is staying in place. Once I have that first seam sewn, I'm just going to go around just to add a little bit more strength to my seams here, and I'm doing another row of stitching 1/8 of an inch away from that first row of stitching into the seam allowance, just to make my seam nice and strong. All right, the tough part is done and she looks good. You can go ahead and you can turn this right side out to make sure that all of your fabric was caught, that there's no raw edges sewing or showing, not sewing. We did the sewing already. Take a look, admire your work. Your exterior is done. It looks fantastic. To the lining. So now we are going to work on our flap. Now this is something I actually ended up having the wrong one on top. You're going to do this opposite what you are going to think. We are marking our centers of our flap lining and our flap exterior pieces. What we want to do is install the male side of our magnetic snap on the exterior side of the flap. Here you see it I'm doing it on the one that I meant to be my lining piece. Wasn't the end of the world. It still ended up looking very good, but make sure that you are putting it on the piece that's going to be shown from the top. And that is because it's opposite from when we usually do flaps, because usually we have it attaching to a magnetic snap that is against the bag, but we have this kind of scooping in and attaching to the lining. So make sure you are attaching this to your exterior piece. So now this is going to be my new exterior piece. I put some tape over top just to make it so my prongs aren't going to rub through to my other piece. We're going to take the exterior and lining piece. We are going to put them right sides together, and we are going to stitch all the way around this with a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance, leaving the long straight edge open for turning. Now that that's done, I'm going to take my pinking shears and I'm just going to go around the curve with this. You can definitely put some little notches in if you prefer. This is just going to get a really nice shape to this. I'm also going to cut at the sharp corners, nice angles without cutting my stitches, of course. Go ahead and turn this right side out, pushing all of your seams nice and taut, getting nice shape, massaging everything in place. Again, I'm so happy I used vinyl for both of these pieces because I did put my magnetic snap on my wrong piece, but it still turned out good, so I'm happy. I'm going to go ahead and use some clips just to kind of hold my seams in place. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to top stitch all the way around this with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, as well as baste the open side shut with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so once that's done, we are going to take our back lining piece, our top and bottom centers. We have this right side up. We are going to take our flat piece, make sure that the magnetic snap is right side up. So both of these pieces are right side up. You're going to take your lining top band piece, find your top and bottom centers, and we are going to put this right side down so it's right sides together with the other pieces, add it into our clips. Make sure it's nice and centered. And then we're going to sew across here with 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Once that is sewn, what we want to do is we want to fold the flap and that top lining piece up and out of the way with our seam pointing towards our lining bottom piece, and we are going to top stitch through the lining to keep that seam in place with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So that is done. I did my other lining piece the exact same way, but you just do not have the flap in there. I also went ahead and did my zipper pocket. If you need a class on how to do that zipper pocket with the bottom open, I do have a class for that down below in the description as well. Just make sure that pocket is open. Okay, so the piece without the zipper pocket and without the flap is where we are going to install our female snap. So you want it to be nice and centered, and it is going to be sitting just below our top stitch seam here. So go ahead and install that magnetic snap as per your manufacturer's instructions. Again, I will be backing mine with a small scrap of Decaville Heavy and some duct tape. So that is all done. I've already gone and put the bottom on my one lining piece. It's done the exact same way as our exterior, except for we use a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and we're going to press that seam open. Now with our opposite side that doesn't have the flap, we are going to leave approximately an 8-inch opening in the bottom for turning. So we're going to put this right sides together with that other bottom side, clip it in place, and then we are just going to sew those two side sections, the left and the right, with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, leaving that 8-inch gap for turning. So we have our hole in the bottom. I went ahead and just pressed the side seams open a little bit. Now, just like we did with the exterior, we're going to measure 3/8 of an inch down from each side of our lining main pieces. And we are going to attach our side pieces in a very similar fashion, but with a one change. So again, you're going to match up that center, bring the sides up to that 3/8 of an inch line that we drew, but you're going to notice as you work your way down that we have excess fabric right around that corner. So right where that bottom seam is, you're going to see your side panel is too big, and that's because we want to create a dart there. So what you're going to do right at that seam, you can see what I'm doing, is I'm creating a purposeful dart right there and holding it in place, having that dart point towards the bottom of the bag. So again, I'm going to do it right here, work myself down. See, when I get to where the bottom seam meets, I have excess. So I'm going to create a dart, pinch it, and fold it over towards the bottom of the bag, secure with clips. And it creates really nice tight shape inside the bag. We're going to go ahead and sew around here with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. So we have our lining done. Our magnetic snap matches up. And we have our exterior done. And now it's time to put them together. So I found the easiest way to do this with such a small bag was to go ahead and turn my exterior wrong side out and my lining right side out. So now I can put my lining inside of my exterior. Make sure that the flap is against the back of your bag, not the front of the bag. You definitely want it at the back. Fold down all of your hardware and your flap out of the way so your lining and your exteriors are right sides together. Match up your centers, clip them together. Again, make sure everything is down and tucked out of the way and that your flap is positioned against the back of your bag. I used a ton of clips here. Do not be afraid to use the clips. Once you have those front main sections done, go ahead and match up your seams on the sides and the centers of your sides, distributing that fabric evenly all the way around. Continue clipping until everything is in place, making sure your seams match up because you want to have nice continuous lines throughout your lining when you're looking down into the bag. Once that is all done, we're going to go ahead. If I was on my flatbed, I would sew from the inside of the bag, but I am going to take this to my cylinder arm and we are going to go ahead and sew with 1/4 inch seam allowance from the outside of the bag here. that is done, you want to go around and make sure everything was caught on both sides, that you're happy with your stitches, that it looks nice and even. Now I'm going to go ahead and clip with my pinking shears just into this curvy part. Again, this was really thick here with the foam that I used. And then at those pointy parts right before the curvy parts, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut on an angle without cutting the seams. Same with into these corners. I'm doing little snips into the corners without cutting my threads. That's going to help us get a nice sharp corner. Reach in through the bottom of the lining and turn your bag right side out. Now make sure to push out all of your seams, poke out all of those corners and curves nice and sharp. This is what gives the bag its extraordinary shape, so do take your time to do that. Once you have them all poked out, I like to go ahead with some clips just to kind of hold my seams in place to prepare for top stitching. Now that that's done, we're all ready to go. We're going to go ahead and we are going to top stitch this with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. There we go. Make sure it all looks good, and she does. Make sure everything matches up before we go to close up that turning hole. It looks great. So now we're going to open up that zipper pocket. You're going to pull through the opening of the zipper pocket, the opening in the bottom of the lining. Once you have that lining pulled through the zipper pocket, we're going to match up the center of the bottoms and clip it in place. and clip all the way across that opening in the bottom of the bag. Now what this is doing is making it so we won't have that ridge at the bottom of the bag if we were just to turn the raw ends over and then top stitch it shut. This is giving us a nice and seamless lining panel that does not have that ridge. This is my utmost favorite way to close up a bag, and I was so happy that Hillary does the same thing. So I went ahead and sewed that with a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. It looks fantastic. I have a thread sticking through. Let's just cut that off. Now you can go ahead and take your zipper pocket and fold those raw edges into each other, and then we are going to top stitch that opening shut at the bottom of the zipper pocket, and then you can stuff your zipper pocket back in. This is a super small zipper pocket. It would be perfect for holding little things like your lip glosses or spare change or what have you. So go ahead and top stitch that shut with making sure the raw edges are folded under with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. There we go. I've attached my handles with rivets. My zipper pocket is closed, everything is caught. I completed my crossbody strap. Pat yourself on the back. Great job, everybody. And we're done. All right, that's it. That's all. What did you think of that? It really wasn't a hard sew at all. I think the toughest part was probably these exterior side parts. But besides that, it wasn't even that hard to turn. So yeah, I truly loved making this bag. Anyways, if you did like this tutorial, please do give me a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. If you'd like to support my channel further, you can always buy me a coffee. That's linked down below in the description. Also check out my membership side. We actually did this bag, because this will be past tense, in our Thursday, April 2023 sew along classes. So there are 8 hours of slowed down instruction, cut to finish, on how to make this bag. If you'd like to see the replays of that, you can definitely join the membership side to see that. It's in the Thursday sew along group tier where you'll be able to see that. Yeah, and besides that, I guess I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye.